The Black Hole, the last Starfall. Prologue. The star was dying. It had burned brightly for billions of years, a titan of fusion and light. But now its core had begun to collapse, the inexorable pull of gravity crushing it inward. Deep within the heart of the star, strange things stirred, ancient things, forgotten things. From the blackness of deep space, a lone ship drifted toward the dying star. Its hull was scarred from centuries of travel, its engines barely holding together. The ship's name was etched in faded white across its side: Valkyrie. Inside the ship, Captain Elias Rourke stood at the viewport, watching the star's final moments. His face was etched with lines of fatigue, his eyes hollow from too many lost years. Beside him, the ship's AI, Lyra, flickered to life. "Captain." Lyra's voice was calm, but there was an undertone of urgency. "We are approaching critical mass. The star will collapse within 2 hours." Elias's jaw tightened. "We're not leaving until we find it. If the star collapses, I know." His fists curled against the cold metal of the console. "Just keep us steady." Outside, the star's corona shuddered. Tendrils of superheated plasma lashed out into the void, twisting unnaturally. The gravity field around the star was fluctuating, bending in ways physics shouldn't allow. And then Elias saw it. A dark, perfect sphere forming at the star's center, a black hole. But it wasn't empty. Something was inside, and it was looking back at him. Chapter 1. Into the Void. The deck beneath Elias's feet shuddered as the gravity field intensified. Red warning lights pulsed along the walls, casting sharp, bloody streaks across the metallic interior. "Lyra, stabilize the inertial dampeners." Elias barked. "Compensating," Lyra replied, her voice perfectly even. "But the gravitational field is increasing exponentially. We are running out of time." Elias gritted his teeth. His breath fogged the glass of his helmet as he stood at the airlock. Beyond the reinforced glass, the dying star pulsed violently. Waves of golden fire cascading outward, only to be devoured by the growing blackness at its core. "Elias." He turned. Commander Sienna Voss stood at the corridor's edge. Her face, pale beneath the harsh red lights, her dark eyes locked onto his. "You're not seriously going out there?" "We came this far," Elias said. "We both saw the readings. There's something inside that black hole." Sienna's lips tightened. "You think it's alive?" "I think it's calling us." A low-frequency vibration rippled through the ship. The hull groaned as the gravitational forces twisted around them. Lyra's voice crackled through the comms. "Captain, the star's mass has reached 98% collapse. If you enter now, I cannot guarantee extraction." Elias's hand tightened on the release latch. "Open the lock." Sienna stepped forward, grabbing his arm. "Elias, if it's alive, Sienna." His eyes burned with quiet desperation. "If it's alive, then maybe it knows what's on the other side." For a long moment, she didn't speak. Finally, she stepped back. "Don't die out there." The airlock slid open with a metallic hiss. A magnetic tether attached to Elias's suit engaged as he stepped into the docking bay. Beyond the transparent barrier, the black hole pulsed like a dark heart. The edges of the event horizon shimmered, unnaturally, flickering with impossible patterns. Elias stepped into the void. Silence. His breath sounded harsh in his helmet as he drifted toward the black hole's edge. The gravitational pull began to drag at him, and his suit's stabilizers hummed in protest. A distorted whisper filled his ears. "Elias." His eyes widened. "Lyra, are you picking that up?" "Negative, Captain." The voice came again, stronger. "This time, come closer." Elias drifted toward the event horizon. The blackness roiled with hints of deep violet and crimson, forming strange shapes beneath the surface. And then he saw it. A hand, formed of light and shadow, stretching outward from the blackness. "Impossible," Elias whispered. The hand reached for him, his stabilizers screamed as the gravitational pull increased. His heartbeat hammered in his ears. "Elias," Sienna's voice through the comm. "Get out of there." But he couldn't move. The hand grasped his arm, and Elias was pulled into the black hole. Darkness swallowed him, and then light. An entire galaxy unfolded before his eyes. Stars that pulsed with unnatural hues, moons with jagged crystal surfaces, and at the center, a colossal structure of obsidian and gold, floating in the void. A single voice filled his mind. "Welcome home, Elias." He opened his mouth to scream. The light consumed him. Chapter 2. The hollow sky. Elias gasped, and his breath hitched. He was breathing. His body was weightless, drifting through a sea of shimmering light and shadow. Stars spiraled above him, impossibly close, their light bleeding into streaks of violet and crimson. His hands flexed. He felt the smooth press of his suit's gloves against his fingers. His helmet display flickered, stabilizing. "Lyra." His voice was hoarse. "Do you copy?" Static. A cold pressure settled against his chest. His breath quickened as his gaze drifted downward, to the massive structure hanging before him. It was impossible. A vast ring of dark metal and gold rotated slowly in the void. Black veins pulsed across its surface, radiating faint tendrils of light that dissolved into the surrounding darkness. Towers of jagged crystal jutted from its core, suspended as if gravity no longer mattered. And at the very center, a dark sphere, crackling with violet arcs of energy. The black hole. "Elias," the voice slid beneath his skin. It was low, melodic, neither male nor female. It carried weight. Authority. "Who's there?" Elias's hand drifted toward the control panel on his suit. No response. He drifted closer to the ring. His stabilizers hissed as they fought the shifting gravitational field. His helmet display flashed warnings. Gravitational pull increasing, magnetic interference rising. But Elias ignored it. A dark pulse vibrated through his bones. His vision blurred, and suddenly he was falling. He hit the ground hard. His knees buckled beneath him, the shock rolling through his legs. Cold metal pressed against his gloved hands. His visor flickered, and then the display went dead. Atmospheric pressure stable, he could breathe. Slowly, he reached for his helmet release. The seal hissed, and cold air rushed in. He removed the helmet and sucked in a sharp breath. The sky above him was hollow. Stars floated within a dark void, but their light was wrong, fractured as if viewed through broken glass. Around him, the vast ring stretched in all directions, ancient towers of crystal and metal rising toward the fractured sky. "Elias." He spun. His hand drifted toward the sidearm on his hip. His breath came fast, ragged. A figure emerged from the shadows. It was tall, impossibly tall, nearly 7 feet. Its body was composed of obsidian and silver, a humanoid form with sharp, angular limbs. Violet light pulsed beneath its dark skin, tracing patterns of ancient script. Its face was smooth and featureless, except for 2 glowing white slits where eyes should have been. "Welcome." Elias's hand hovered over his sidearm. "Who are you?" The figure's head tilted. "We are the architects." "We." Elias stepped back. His boots echoed against the metal floor. "What is this place?" The figure took a single step forward, and the ground hummed beneath Elias's feet. "You stand within the hollow sky. A place beyond time, beyond light. You were chosen." "Chosen for what?" The figure extended a hand. Its long, claw-like fingers shimmered with violet light. "To witness the truth." Elias's mouth tightened. "Why me?" The figure's eyes flashed brighter. "Because you have already seen the edge of the void, and survived." Suddenly, the dark sphere at the center of the structure pulsed. A low-frequency hum vibrated through the floor. Elias's head throbbed. His vision blurred. And then he saw it, a glimpse beyond the black hole, a field of stars, burning, collapsing, and something vast and coiled moving beneath them. Dark limbs, countless eyes. "What the hell is that?" Elias stumbled back. "The Devourer." The figure's voice sharpened. "It is coming. And you expect me to stop it?" The figure's hand lowered. "You misunderstand." A second pulse rolled through the structure. The violet lines along the figure's body flickered, dimmed. The Devourer is drawn to collapsing stars. It feeds on them. This black hole was a doorway. It sensed the opening. Elias's breath quickened. Then we need to close it. The figure's eyes dimmed. That may not be possible. Elias's jaw tightened. If you brought me here, you had a reason. A pause. Then the figure's hand lifted, and a burst of violet light erupted from its palm. A holographic display materialized in the air, a swirling map of the galaxy. Countless points of light pulsed across its surface, and at the center a black stain was spreading outward. The Devourer is not alone, the figure said. It is part of a greater force, one that exists beyond this galaxy. You have seen only the beginning. Elias stared at the growing blackness on the map. How long? The Devourer will reach this system in 8 cycles. Elias shook his head. That's not enough time. It will be, if you are willing to enter the singularity. Elias's breath caught. The black hole. At its core lies a weapon, a fragment of the first star. Only it holds the power to repel the Devourer. Elias stepped toward the figure. His chest tightened. And what happens to me if I enter the black hole? The figure's glowing eyes dimmed. No one has ever returned. Elias's heartbeat hammered in his ears. His hands curled into fists. Then I'll be the first. Light flooded through him. Memories that weren't his. Stars forming, worlds burning. Endless cycles of creation and destruction. His breath caught as his vision filled with spiraling galaxies and collapsing stars. And at the center of it all, the Devourer. It was coming. Elias screamed as the light surged into him. His suit's systems crashed. His neural link overloaded. But he didn't stop. His hand closed around the core. A blinding pulse of light exploded from the black hole's center. The Devourer shrieked. The light twisted into Elias's chest, burning through his veins. He arched backward as power surged into him, a living current of creation and destruction. His vision narrowed to a single, white-hot point of light, and then darkness. Elias opened his eyes. He lay on the cold floor of the ringed structure. His breath came ragged. His body trembled. The violet lights beneath him pulsed softly. He lifted his hand. A flicker of white light danced along his palm. Captain Rourke, the figure's voice slid through the dark. You have touched the source. Elias's hand curled into a fist. And now, the figure's eyes pulsed. Now you become the weapon. Chapter 4. The becoming Elias knelt on the cold metal floor, his breath ragged. The white light flickering along his hand pulsed with a quiet hum. Alive. It slid beneath his skin, veins of golden light threading up his arm and into his chest. His heart hammered against his ribs, pounding with an unnatural rhythm. He could feel it, the power of the core twisting through his bones. It burned and froze at the same time, like holding a star in an ice storm in the palm of his hand. The figure stood over him, tall and motionless. Its obsidian skin shimmered faintly beneath the fractured sky. The white slits of its eyes narrowed. You have survived the forging. Elias forced himself to stand. His muscles screamed in protest, but the light beneath his skin pushed him upward. His vision sharpened. His breath steadied. He looked down at his hand, opened his palm. A thin line of light rippled outward, forming a faint geometric pattern across his skin. He flexed his fingers, and the light followed. What is this? The fragment of the first star, the figure said. It has bonded to you. Elias's jaw tightened. Why? The figure's gaze darkened. Because the core knows its purpose. It was created to repel the darkness, to burn the void away. A low-frequency pulse vibrated through the ringed structure. The black hole at its center flickered violently, the dark surface distorting as something massive shifted beneath it. Elias's hand curled into a fist. The Devourer. It senses the power within you. The figure's voice sharpened. And now, it hungers. A deep guttural sound echoed through the hollow sky. a low growl beneath the fabric of space. Elias's head snapped toward the black hole as its surface began to twist and bulge. Tendrils of black matter slithered outward, curling against the edges of the ring. A single massive eye opened at the core of the black hole. It burned with cold red fire, framed by jagged scars of violet light. Elias's pulse quickened. "What the hell is that?" "The Devourer," the figure said. "It is awake." The black hole's tendrils lashed outward. Segments of the ring structure shattered as the gravity field destabilized. Jagged pieces of metal and crystal tumbled into the void. Elias staggered as the deck beneath his feet buckled. The light in his hand surged in response, instinctive, and suddenly the air bent around him. A barrier of white light erupted from his palm, surrounding him in a thin, shimmering shield. The gravitational pull weakened. Elias's breath caught. "Can control it, only in part," the figure said. "You are still incomplete." The Devourer's massive eye pulsed, and a deep growl rolled through the ringed structure. Elias's barrier flickered as gravity twisted violently around him. "Captain," Sienna's voice. His comm was back online. "Elias, what's happening?" Elias pressed his hand to the side of his helmet. "Sienna, status? The star is collapsing. Gravitational shear is off the charts. Get the Valkyrie clear." "Not without you." A sudden, sharp pressure coiled around Elias's chest. His breath hitched as dark tendrils from the black hole lashed toward him, twisting into sharpened spears of shadow. Elias's hand lifted. The gi. White light in his palm blazed. The tendrils struck, and the light erupted outward. A shockwave blasted through the ring structure. The tendrils of shadow dissolved into dark vapor. The Devourer's eye narrowed. The figure's head tilted slightly. "Impressive." Elias exhaled, his chest rising and falling rapidly. His hand trembled from the energy still humming beneath his skin. "I can use it." "Yes," the figure said. "But you are not yet whole." "Then how do I finish this?" The figure extended. Single obsidian finger toward the black hole. "Enter the core." Elias's breath sharpened. "If I go back in, won't it kill me?" The figure's eyes glowed brighter. "Perhaps." A low pulse from the black hole vibrated through Elias's chest. A distorted whisper slid beneath his skin. Hungry. Hollow. "Elias." The Devourer's voice. "I know you." Elias's hand tightened. Into a fist, his veins flashed white beneath his skin. "Yeah?" His lips curled into a hard smile. "Then you know what I'm capable of." The Devourer's eye flared with red fire. A deep, resonant growl shook the platform beneath Elias's feet. More tendrils coiled from the black hole, twisting through the air. Elias turned toward the figure. "Tell me how to stop it." The figure's gaze sharpened. "You cannot stop it. Not alone." "Then what the hell was the point of all this?" "You misunderstand." The figure stepped closer, the lines of violet energy beneath its dark surface pulsing with faint light. "The fragment within you is not a weapon. Then what is it?" The figure's eyes narrowed. "A key." Elias's eyes darkened. "A key to what?" The figure turned toward the black hole. The Devourer's tendrils curled toward the ring's outer edge. Another pulse of dark gravity distorted the air. "A door." Elias's heart hammered. "What's behind the door?" The figure's glowing eyes fixed on him. "The end." Elias's breath hitched. "You're saying there's more of them?" The figure's head inclined slightly. "The Devourer is not the first, nor the last." Elias's pulse quickened. "Then, what happens if I open it?" "You will awaken what sleeps beyond the veil." The black hole throbbed violently. The Devourer's massive eye narrowed. "And if I don't?" Elias's hand flexed, the white light dancing across his knuckles. "Then the Devourer will consume everything." Elias's breath slowed. His gaze darkened. "So you're saying I have a choice?" The figure's gaze burned bright. "Yes." Elias's eyes narrowed toward the black hole. The Devourer's massive eye watched him, unblinking. "Then I guess there's only one question left." He lifted his hand. The white light burned along his palm. "What happens if I tear the whole damn door?" Down, the figure's eyes pulsed with violet light. Then, you may become something greater. Elias smiled faintly. His hand opened, the light spiraling outward. Let's find out. He stepped toward the edge of the platform. The black hole loomed before him, twisting, hungry. The Devourer's growl sharpened. Elias extended his hand toward the core and jumped. Chapter 5. Into the Veil Darkness. Cold, endless, crushing darkness. Elias plunged through the event horizon, the white light in his chest flickering violently as the gravitational pull of the black hole shredded the laws of physics around him. Space and time folded, twisting into impossible shapes. Fragments of light and shadow danced across his vision, dissolving into spirals of color and static. His suit's systems screamed warnings, but the core's energy within him overpowered them. His breath tore from his lungs as the pressure built. His body should have been crushed, broken apart at the molecular level, but the light inside him pushed back, holding the singularity's wrath at bay. Elias, the Devourer's voice slid through the dark like smoke, hollow, hungry. Elias's hand flexed as the white light spread beneath his skin. Yeah, I hear you. His voice was tight. Cold sweat slid down his temple as he twisted through the blackness. A ripple of dark energy lashed toward him, a massive tendril of shadow and void. Elias's eyes narrowed. He raised his hand, and the light surged. A wave of golden fire erupted from his palm, colliding with the tendril. The impact blasted through the void, sending shockwaves of warped starlight in every direction. The tendril dissolved into dark vapor. You can't scare me. Elias's lips curled. I've been through worse. Have you? The Devourer's eye opened in the dark, massive and burning with cold red light. Its jagged pupil narrowed as shadows slithered through the void. You carry the first light. Elias's hand trembled. The light beneath his skin pulsed harder. Yeah? His jaw tightened. And you don't like that, do you? A deep, resonant growl slid through the void. You do not understand what you carry. A thin tendril of shadow curled toward Elias's chest. Directly toward the light, let me show you. The tendril lashed forward, and Elias struck. His hand snapped upward, the light erupting in a brilliant arc of golden fire. The tendril evaporated on contact. Elias twisted in the void, light and shadow spiraling around him as the black hole's core widened beneath him. A jagged ring of violet light pulsed at the center, the core of the singularity. He could feel it pulling at him, the gravitational tide like cold hooks dragging at his limbs. But the light held. Lyra. His AI's voice responded immediately. Captain, status? You are approaching the gravitational boundary of the core. Structural integrity is failing. Yeah, I noticed. Elias's hand trembled. The light beneath his skin throbbed painfully. Options? Unknown. Lyra's voice darkened. No known vessel has survived this depth within a singularity. Elias's jaw tightened. First time for everything. A ripple of dark gravity exploded toward him. Elias shot his hand forward. The light in his palm ignited. But this time, the tendrils absorbed it. His eyes widened. Shit. The Devourer's eye narrowed. Did you think this power would protect you? A massive tendril lashed toward him and struck. Elias's body convulsed as cold fire ripped through his chest. His vision darkened as the light in his veins flickered violently. Pain exploded through his mind, white-hot and unbearable. His suit's systems overloaded. Oxygen levels dropped. His muscles seized. The Devourer's eye pulsed. Give it to me. Elias's pulse slowed. His breath shuddered in his throat. His vision blurred. The light inside him flickered. Surrender. Elias's body slackened. His breath slowed. His heart faltered. And then, a sound. Faint at first. A voice. Elias! Sienna. His eyes snapped open. His vision swam with static, but her voice burned through the darkness. Elias! Wake the hell up! The light in his chest pulsed faintly. Elias's jaw clenched. His teeth ground together. No! The Devourer's eye widened. Elias's hand flexed. The light beneath his skin flared. No! His voice sharpened. His breath quickened. His muscles coiled beneath his suit. The Devourer's tendril tightened. Surrender. Screw you! The light in Elias's hand ignited, and a shockwave of golden fire erupted from his chest. The Devourer's tendrils evaporated in a burst of white-hot light. Elias's eyes blazed as he twisted through the void. His body straightened. His breath steadied. The core pulsed beneath him, vast and spiraling, but the light no longer faltered. It sharpened, strengthened. Elias's eyes narrowed. Lyra. Yes. Captain, can you stabilize the core? With your current power signature, theoretically possible. Elias smiled faintly. Then let's try something stupid. He twisted toward the core. The Devourer's growl sharpened, furious, as more tendrils coiled toward him. Elias shot forward. The light beneath his skin surged. Tendrils lashed toward him, but this time, Elias didn't raise his hand. He let the light do the work. It spiraled outward from his chest, expanding into a radiant field of golden light. The Devourer's tendrils disintegrated on contact. The core trembled violently. The Devourer's eye narrowed. No. Elias's hand opened. The light blazed. Good night. Asshole. He drove his hand forward, and the core shattered. A blinding pulse of golden fire erupted through the black hole. The Devourer shrieked as the light twisted into a massive spiral, a supernova of creation and destruction igniting at once. The void fractured. Elias felt himself being pulled. Captain, Sienna's voice. We've got you. A bright beam of blue light shot through the dark. A tether of energy coiled around Elias's arm. Pull him in. Elias's vision narrowed. His pulse hammered in his ears. He saw the black hole collapsing beneath him, the light surging toward its center. And then, the darkness vanished. Elias gasped as his eyes snapped open. His body lay against the metal floor of the Valkyrie's bridge. His suit systems, rebooted. Sienna knelt over him, breathless. Her eyes were wide. You're alive. Elias smiled faintly. Told you. Sienna's gaze narrowed. Don't ever pull that crap again. Elias pushed himself upright. His hand trembled, but the light beneath, his skin pulsed steadily, controlled. Out the viewport, the black hole's core was gone. Only a thin ring of violet light remained, the remnants of creation and destruction intertwined. Lyra's voice hummed through the comm. Captain, threat neutralized. Elias exhaled. Yeah, for now. Sienna's gaze sharpened. What now? Elias's eyes darkened. His hand opened, the light flickering along his palm. Now? He smiled faintly. We find out what's behind the next door. Chapter 6. Aftershock Elias stood at the bridge's forward viewport, his gaze fixed on the remnants of the black hole. A thin halo of violet light pulsed faintly where the singularity had been. The swirling gravitational field had dissolved, leaving only a void, hollow and quiet. The vast darkness of interstellar space stretched beyond it, broken only by the faint glow of distant stars. The light beneath Elias's skin still pulsed, slower now, steadier. But it hadn't gone dark. His hand flexed at his side, and a thin thread of white gold fire curled beneath his palm. It felt natural now. Like breathing. Sienna's reflection appeared in the glass beside him. Doesn't feel like a win, she said quietly. Elias's jaw tightened. Because it isn't. Sienna's eyes narrowed toward the faint ring of light in the distance. You collapsed a singularity. That's about as much of a win as it gets. Elias's lips twisted into a faint smirk. Yeah? Then why does it feel like? We just opened a bigger problem. Sienna sighed. Because we probably did. Elias turned toward her. Her dark brown hair was pulled back beneath her flight jacket, and her eyes were sharp with calculation, the tactical edge of a pilot still running a threat assessment. Elias's gaze darkened. It's not over. Sienna's jaw flexed. The Devourer's gone. You blew the damn thing to pieces. Elias's hand curled into a fist. The light beneath his skin brightened for half a second, a brief pulse of cold fire. No, his voice sharpened. It's not gone. Sienna's brows creased. You felt something? Elias's gaze drifted toward the ring of violet light. It's still out there, somewhere beneath the surface. Sienna's jaw tightened. If the Devourer survived, it's not just the Devourer, Elias said quietly. Sienna's gaze sharpened. Elias's breath slowed. His heartbeat thudded steadily beneath. His chest, deep and resonant, synchronized with the light beneath his skin. I saw it, he said. Beyond the core, through the veil. Sienna stepped closer. Saw what? Elias's hand opened. The light in his palm curled outward in thin spirals of golden fire. A gate, he said, and something behind it. Sienna's breath hitched. What was it? Elias's eyes darkened. I don't know. A quiet pulse rolled through the bridge's bulkheads, low and rhythmic. Elias's gaze sharpened toward the source. Lyra? The ship's AI responded immediately. Yes, Captain. Report. We are detecting residual gravitational activity from the singularity. Elias's pulse quickened. Explain. Localized distortions in spacetime, Lyra said. The singularity's collapse released a secondary wave of dark energy. It is searching. Elias's brows furrowed. Searching? Yes. Lyra's tone darkened. It is not merely dispersing, it is reorganizing. Sienna's gaze sharpened. That doesn't sound good. It isn't, Elias said. A quiet alarm pulsed across the bridge. Lyra's holographic display flickered. A series of complex waveforms twisted and collapsed across the screen. The pattern was erratic, fractured. Captain, Lyra's voice sharpened. We have a proximity anomaly. Elias's eyes narrowed. Location? Directly ahead, Elias stepped toward the viewport. His gaze locked on the ring of violet light in the distance. A flicker, thin and sharp, like the edge of a blade cutting through the fabric of space. Sienna stiffened. Did you see that? Elias's jaw tightened. Another flicker. The ring of violet light shuddered. A thin vertical line of darkness began to widen at its center, like the slow splitting of a wound. Elias's hand flexed. The light beneath his skin brightened instinctively. Lyra's voice sharpened. Spatial breach forming. Elias's pulse hammered. What's coming through? Lyra hesitated. Unknown. Sienna's hand slid toward the console. Her fingers brushed the weapons grid. Activating ship defenses. Elias's gaze darkened. Hold! Sienna's eyes widened. What? Elias's hand lifted. The light curled outward along his arm, rising like mist. A pulse of cold fire erupted from the breach. Thin, dark tendrils. A violet light curling outward. The breach widened. A dark figure emerged from the center, silhouetted against the fractured light. Elias's breath sharpened. The figure stepped forward. Tall, thin, draped in black, with veins of violet light, threading across its surface like living cracks in stone. Its face was concealed beneath an obsidian helm. Two narrow slits of white light burned where its eyes should have been. Elias's jaw clenched. Sienna's hand tightened on the weapons grid. Who the hell is that? The figure's head tilted. The white slits of its eyes narrowed toward Elias. He carries the first light, the figure said. Its voice was smooth, low, and cold. Elias's hand burned with white gold light. Yeah? His gaze sharpened. You're going to have to be more specific. The figure's eyes pulsed. We felt its awakening. Elias stepped toward the viewport. His pulse sharpened. Who the hell are you? The figure's helm pulsed faintly with dark light. A watcher. Sienna's eyes widened. A watcher? Elias's pulse quickened. Of what? The figure's gaze darkened. The gate. Elias's breath hitched. The figure stepped closer. Its obsidian form shimmered faintly beneath the bridge's pale light. You have disturbed the balance. Elias's hand flexed. The light beneath his skin coiled upward along his arm. Balance? His gaze darkened. There was no balance. The Devourer was killing everything in its path. The Devourer was contained. The Watcher's voice sharpened. Now it is not. Elias's jaw tightened. And whose fault is that? The Watcher's gaze narrowed. Yours. Sienna's hand moved toward the weapons grid. Elias raised his hand. Stand down. Sienna's gaze tightened. Are you serious? The Watcher's eyes narrowed toward Elias's hand, toward the light beneath his skin. The first light is not a weapon. Elias's eyes sharpened. Then what is it? The Watcher's gaze pulsed faintly. A key. Elias's breath slowed. The Watcher's form shimmered as dark tendrils curled around its frame. The gate was sealed for a reason. The Watcher's eyes burned. You will not survive what sleeps beyond it. Elias's jaw flexed. Yeah, he raised his hand. The white gold light spiraled along his fingers. Then maybe it's time to stop knocking. The Watcher's gaze sharpened. Then you are already lost. Elias's hand opened. A thin pulse of white light spiraled outward. The Watcher's form flickered, and then dissolved into dark vapor. The breach in space pulsed violently, then sealed. Elias's breath slowed. Sienna exhaled sharply. What the hell was that? Elias's gaze narrowed toward the fading ring of violet light. The beginning, he said quietly. Chapter 7. Echoes of the Gate. The hum of the Valkyrie's engines thrummed beneath Elias's boots as he stood in the dim glow of the ship's command center. The starlight outside the viewport flickered unevenly, distorted by the lingering gravity waves from the collapsed singularity. The ring of violet light was gone now, but Elias could still feel it. An emptiness beneath his skin, like a phantom pulse. The light inside him stirred. Faint. Uneasy. Sienna leaned against the console. Behind him, arms crossed. You've been quiet. Elias's gaze remained fixed on the stars. Processing. Sienna's brow lifted. Processing what? The fact that you just blew up a black hole? Or that we've apparently pissed off some interdimensional hall monitor? Elias's jaw tightened. His hand flexed at his side, the white light beneath his skin curling faintly upward. The Watcher said it was a key. Sienna's gaze sharpened. What? Elias turned toward her. The light. He called it a key. Sienna pushed off the console. A key to what? Elias's gaze darkened. The gate. Sienna's eyes narrowed. And that's bad? Elias exhaled slowly. It's worse than bad. His jaw flexed. I saw it when I crossed the event horizon. There's something behind that gate. Trapped. Sienna stepped toward him, her eyes sharpened. Trapped? Elias's gaze lifted toward the stars. The Devourer was feeding off the singularity, using it to keep the gate sealed. That's why it was here. It wasn't trying to consume the universe. Sienna's breath slowed. It was trying to keep something out. Elias's eyes darkened. Or keep something in. A sharp pulse of energy rolled through the ship's hull. Elias's gaze narrowed. Lyra, Captain. The AI's voice was calm, but edged with static. We have an anomaly. Sienna straightened. Location? Directly ahead. Elias's gaze sharpened toward the viewport. A thin pulse of violet light flickered across the distant starlight. Another ripple. Then another. Sienna's hand slid toward the weapons grid. Please tell me that's not what I think it is. Energy signature is consistent with the previous gravitational distortions. Lyra's voice sharpened. However, the signal is fragmented. Elias's jaw flexed. Fragmented how? Multiple points. Origin? Elias's eyes narrowed. How many? 7. Sienna's breath hitched. 7? Confirmed. Another pulse flickered through the stars. Thin filaments of violet light curled through the black, spreading outward like veins. Sienna's gaze sharpened. The Devourer's gone. What the hell is making those? Unknown. Elias's hand curled into a fist. The light beneath his skin brightened, steady and sharp. Lyra, give me a visual. A three-dimensional map of the star field appeared above the console. 7 pulsing nodes of violet light shimmered along the edges of the grid, scattered across the sector. Sienna's brow furrowed. They're Equidistant. Elias's gaze sharpened. That's a pattern. Sienna's eyes darkened. Coordinates? Transmitting now. Elias stepped toward the map. His gaze narrowed as the coordinates stabilized, forming a geometric shape. 7 equidistant points. A circle. A gate. Sienna's gaze sharpened. You've got to be kidding me. Elias's jaw tightened. They're opening it. Sienna's hand slid toward the weapons grid. Do we have a play here? Elias's hand flexed. Yeah. His eyes darkened. We stop it. Sienna's lips thinned. How? Elias's gaze sharpened. We get ahead of it. Sienna's brow lifted. You want to get closer to the thing trying to kill us? Elias smiled faintly. Exactly. Sienna exhaled sharply. We really need to talk about your survival instincts. Captain, Lyra interrupted. The energy signature at the nearest point is escalating. How long? Elias's eyes narrowed. 7 minutes before it stabilizes. Elias turned toward the command console. Plot a course to the nearest point. Sienna stiffened. Elias, we don't have time, Sienna. Her jaw flexed. Fine. She slid into the pilot's seat. But if this kills us, I'm haunting you. Elias smiled faintly. I'd expect nothing less. Sienna's hands flew over the controls. The Valkyrie's engines surged as the ship's thrusters ignited, engaging FTL drive. Lyra's voice sharpened. Brace for shift. The ship's hull vibrated. A thin band of white light coiled along the edges of the viewport as the ship accelerated. The starlight blurred into streaks of silver and blue. Elias steadied his breath. The light beneath his skin pulsed. Steady. Calm. Sienna's gaze flicked toward him. You're too calm about this. Elias's hand opened. The light curled upward, along his palm. I'm starting to figure it out. Sienna's brow lifted. Figure what out? Elias's gaze darkened. The light. It's not just a weapon. Sienna's lips thinned. You think you can control it? I know I can. A thin alarm pulsed. Cross the console. Captain. Lyra's voice sharpened. We are approaching the designated coordinates. Elias straightened. Drop us out. The starlight fragmented as the ship decelerated. The streaks of light twisted, shuddered, and then collapsed into darkness. The stars returned. Sienna's breath slowed. Elias? Elias's gaze sharpened. Toward the viewport, a ring of violet light pulsed faintly in the distance. 6 more points of violet light pulsed faintly in the dark, forming a perfect circle. At the center, a massive structure hung in the void, dark, obsidian, ancient. Veins of violet energy curled along its surface, the same pattern Elias had seen beneath the black hole. Sienna's voice tightened. That's not a gate. Elias's breath sharpened. No. His jaw flexed. It's a lock. A sharp pulse erupted from the center of the structure. Lyra's voice darkened. Energy spike detected. The ring of light pulsed brighter. Sienna's hand shot toward the controls. Elias, we need to get out of here. Elias's eyes narrowed. The light beneath his skin sharpened, cold and bright. No. Sienna's breath itched. Elias, I have to stop this. Elias's hand opened and the light blazed. Chapter 8. The ring of violet light burned in the void. Its pulsing edges shimmered with thin tendrils of dark energy, curling outward like fractured veins of glass. At the center of the ring, the massive obsidian structure hovered, in silence, ancient and dark, etched with symbols that pulsed faintly with violet fire. Elias's hand hovered above the control console, his palm burning with white gold light. The sensation beneath his skin wasn't pain anymore. It was recognition. It knew him. And now, he knew it. Sienna's hands tightened on the controls. Elias, whatever you're thinking, stop. We need to get out of here. Elias's gaze narrowed. Toward the ring. We can't leave. Sienna's jaw tightened. You saw what happened last time. This thing nearly killed you. It nearly destroyed the ship. Hell, it nearly destroyed the entire sector. I know. Elias's eyes sharpened. That's why we need to stop it now. Sienna's gaze darkened. And how exactly do you plan on doing that? Elias's hand opened. The white light beneath his skin curled outward in thin spirals. The Watcher called this a key. That lock out there, it's waiting for something. Yeah, maybe for someone not human. Sienna's voice sharpened. What if you open it and something worse comes through? Elias's jaw flexed. Then we close it. Sienna's eyes narrowed. Just like that? Elias's hand tightened into a fist. The light beneath his skin brightened. Just like that. A sharp pulse rippled through the ship's hull. Lyra's voice crackled through the comms. Captain, we have incoming. Elias's gaze sharpened. What kind of incoming? Multiple gravitational signatures approaching from all directions. Sienna's hands flew across the controls. Confirm. A holographic map shimmered into view above the console. 7 distinct blips pulsing at the edge of the grid. Elias's breath slowed. What are they? Lyra's tone darkened. Matching energy signatures to the Devourer, Sienna stiffened. You said we killed it. Elias's gaze darkened. We killed one. Sienna's hand tightened on the thruster controls. You're telling me there's more? Lyra's voice sharpened. Confirmed. Sienna's hand flew toward the weapons grid. Activating ship defenses. No! Sienna's eyes widened. No! Elias's hand opened. The light beneath his skin curled outward in thin spirals of white fire. I'm handling this. Sienna's eyes darkened. Elias. A thin pulse of violet light erupted from the lock. A low, resonant hum vibrated through the ship's hull. Lyra's voice sharpened. Energy surge detected. Sienna's hand shot toward the thrusters. That's it. We're leaving. Elias's hand shot out and caught her wrist. His eyes were sharp, dark beneath the glow of white light in his veins. Sienna. His voice was calm, steady. I need you to trust me. Her breath tightened. Elias, wait, please. Sienna's jaw flexed. Her hand dropped away from the controls. Fine. Her gaze sharpened. But if you die out there, I'm coming after you. Elias smiled faintly. Wouldn't have it any other way, the yet. Ship's outer hull vibrated beneath his boots. The ring of violet light pulsed brighter, faster. Elias stepped toward the viewport. His breath steadied. Lyra. Yes, Captain. Open the airlock. Sienna's eyes widened. Wait, now! Lyra hesitated for half a second. Then the sound of decompression echoed through the hull. A red warning light flared above the bulkhead. Elias stepped toward the airlock. Sienna's eyes darkened. Elias, he turned toward her. I'm coming back. His gaze sharpened. Keep the engines hot. Before she could argue, Elias stepped through the airlock. The doors sealed behind him. The vacuum of space folded around him. Elias's breath slowed. The light beneath his skin flared outward, curling along his body like living armor. He drifted toward the ring. The obsidian lock at the center pulsed faintly. Thin arcs of violet. Fire crackled across its surface. A deep, resonant hum vibrated through his chest. Elias's eyes narrowed. I know you can hear me. A pulse rolled outward from the lock. Thin threads of violet light curled toward him. Elias's hand opened. The white gold light in his palm brightened. You want the key? Elias's gaze sharpened. Come get it. The lock pulsed. The symbols along its surface glowed brighter. The threads of violet light curled toward his hand, curling, wrapping around his arm. Elias's breath sharpened. A low voice drifted through the void, cold and resonant. You do not understand what you are opening. Elias's gaze narrowed. Then show me. A pulse erupted from the lock. The threads of violet light surged along Elias's arm, burning cold. His breath hitched. For a moment his mind fractured. His thoughts unraveled, and then he saw it. A vast void, an ancient structure of stone and fire, twisting, endless. Figures etched in black flame standing beneath a sky of shattered stars. A shape, immense and dark, bound in chains of light. Eyes, burning white eyes. A flash of cold light tore through his mind. And then, the void collapsed. Elias's breath sharpened. He staggered backward, gasping. The lock pulsed violently. The threads of violet light curled along his arm, burning against the white light beneath his skin. You cannot control it. Elias's jaw tightened. Watch me. His hand opened. The white gold light in his palm erupted. A thin beam of golden fire shot outward, striking the lock's core. The lock shuddered. The symbols across its surface burned white. The threads of violet light fractured, dissolving into thin spirals of smoke. Deep, low sound echoed through the void. Not mechanical, but alive. The lock pulsed violently, once inked, and then dimmed. Elias's breath slowed. The lock hung motionless. Then, a thin ripple of violet light curled across the surface. Elias's gaze narrowed. A dark figure stepped through the void beyond the lock. Tall, thin, clad in black with burning white eyes beneath a dark helm. The Watcher. You should not have done that. Elias's gaze sharpened. You're welcome. The Watcher's gaze darkened. It is too late. Elias's breath sharpened. Behind the Watcher, beyond the lock, something moved. Darkness. Something. Waking. The Watcher's eyes burned. You have awakened it. Elias's jaw tightened. His hand curled into a fist. The white gold light in his veins pulsed brighter. Good. Chapter 9. The Waking. The space around Elias shuddered. Every pulse of light, every flicker of energy felt as if it was dragging at his very soul, threatening to tear him apart. The lock had gone silent, but the Watcher was not. The dark figure stood before him, looming in the vast emptiness of space. Its eyes, burning white, pierced through the darkness with a cold, unfeeling gaze. The figure was clothed in shadows, its form stretching unnaturally tall and thin beneath. A dark, featureless helm. For a moment, the void around them was still. No sound, no movement, just a staring silence. Elias's breath steadied as he stood in the weight of that silence. The light beneath his skin pulsed steadily, a constant rhythm in the chaos. You're not human, Elias said, his voice low and sharp. The Watcher did not respond at first, but the white eyes seemed to narrow slightly. You should not have interfered. Elias's eyes darkened. Interfered? You were going to unleash whatever that was. He gestured toward the lock. You think I was just going to stand back and let that happen? The Watcher's gaze flickered toward the still structure. You do not understand what you have done. Elias's fists clenched. The light beneath his skin brightened, flaring outward in waves. Then explain it to me. The Watcher's form seemed to shift, bending and stretching as though it wasn't entirely bound by the laws of space. It spoke again, its voice a cold, rasping echo that seemed to vibrate in the core of Elias's mind. You have unlocked a force beyond comprehension. The structure you see before you is not a gate. It is a seal, a binding. And what it holds is the force that devoured worlds before your kind ever learned to speak. Elias's heart skipped a beat. A force? A devourer, the Watcher said, its tone darkening. A consuming force, endless in hunger, and it has been bound for eons. Until now. Elias stepped back, the light in his veins flaring again. The air around him seemed to distort. What happens now? The Watcher's form rippled. You have given it a way out. Elias's breath quickened. A way out of what? The Watcher lifted one long arm, pointing toward the dark horizon of space beyond the lock. And for the first time, Elias could sense it. Something vast moving in the distance, something that should not have been there. Something alive. The hunger begins again. Elias's mind snapped into overdrive. His heart hammered in his chest. The light beneath his skin flared once again, brighter this time, hotter. I won't let it. Elias's voice was firm, shaking with the weight of the decision. Whatever you've unleashed, I'm stopping it. Right here, right now. The Watcher's head tilted slightly, as if considering him. You cannot control what you have awakened. Elias's eyes were like steel. I'm not trying to control it. I'm trying to destroy it. The Watcher's form shifted again. the darkness of its body warping around its features. The light seemed to flicker around it, as though it was not entirely of this dimension. Then you will fail. A sharp pulse of energy rolled through the air. A faint shimmer of violet light exploded from the lock. Elias's body tensed. He reached toward the energy building inside him, feeling the white gold light beneath his skin surge, expanding into the space around him. Suddenly, the structure at the heart of the lock shuddered, and a sound like 1,000 voices, all whispering, filled the void. The air itself vibrated. The stars flickered. A crack appeared in the lock, faint at first, but then spreading outward like a fracture in reality itself. Elias's stomach twisted. The Watcher's voice rang out again. "You have no idea what you've done. This is the end." "No." Elias's voice was sharp. "This is just the beginning." As the crack in the lock widened, a new presence began to press against the edges of reality. A darkness so pure, it was like the very concept of nothingness itself was trying to break through. Elias could feel the pull of it, the force of it, as though it were trying to suck him into oblivion. But the white gold light beneath his skin blazed brighter. His heartbeat drummed in his ears, steady and unyielding. The light extended outward, forming tendrils of energy that wrapped around the fractures in the lock. He could feel the connection. He could feel it. "This isn't your world anymore," Elias muttered, his voice a mixture of defiance and determination. With a flick of his wrist, the light beneath his skin surged. The cracks in the lock widened violently, and a roaring sound filled the void. The whispers of 1,000 voices became a scream, but Elias was ready. The white light burned brighter, and with a final shattering pulse, Elias forced the lock to collapse, wrapping the light around it like chains of pure force. The dark shape that had been pressing against reality, the force that had been bound for eons, screamed in the dark, its hunger relentless. For a brief moment, Elias's vision blinded with the intensity of the light. His body trembled under the force, but his mind remained focused. And then, in a final blinding burst, the lock shattered. The dark presence recoiled, but it was too late. Elias had severed its connection to this reality. The screams of the Devourer faded into nothingness. The structure of the lock collapsed inward on itself, folding into oblivion. The Watcher, its form disappearing into the void, spoke one last time. "You have made your choice, Captain Elias, and now there will be a price." The light in Elias's veins dimmed, but his body still vibrated with the intensity of the confrontation. He staggered, catching his breath. For a long moment, the only sound was the distant hum of the Valkyrie's engines, the fading echoes of the battle ringing in his ears. But the weight of the Watcher's words pressed against his mind. "There will be a price." Elias's hand flexed, the white light fading back into his skin. He was standing on the precipice of something bigger now, and the universe, it was watching. "The price," the voice came again, faint and cold like the rustle of the dead wind. "The price of freedom is never what you think it is." And then, from the rift, the massive shape moved. Its dark silhouette stretched outward, and as it did, the universe seemed to fold around it, as though it couldn't bear to contain it any longer. The light beneath Elias's skin shivered. The universe itself was breaking apart. "No," Elias repeated, his voice cracking. "We can't let this happen." Sienna's hand scrambled over the controls. "Elias, we can't stop it. There's no way to—" But it was already too late. The rift expanded, and the thing beyond it began to pour through. The dark shape loomed larger, its burning white eyes staring into the very heart of everything. And as it did, Elias understood. The cost was not just his, it was everyone's. The end. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the story. Let me know in the comments what ideas you would like the next story to be about. Please leave a thumbs up, share, subscribe, comment.